Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And as it happens, we're going to be talking about what you can use sealing wax for in your Dungeons and Dragons game or your Dungeons and Dragons 5e game. That is the topic for today. This is another really useful piece of adventuring gear, but it's kind of odd. It's really quite strange, in fact. I know when I talked about sealing wax with other people, usually the fallback is, well, you can seal a letter, and that's really it. But there was, in fact, a lot more to it than that. And what I've done is essentially I went and put up a post and a comment on the Dungeons and Dragons community on Facebook to help me construct this guide. So this is not all of my ideas. These are ideas pulled by multiple brains that had played Dungeons and Dragons and figured this sort of stuff out. So what can you use sealing wax for in your adventuring? Well, let's start off with the first one. You can seal a letter or an envelope so that you know if it has been opened before you tried to read it. That is the most common use for sealing wax. But actually, there's more. Sealing wax can also be used as a very mild or weak adhesive for sticking something on to a surface. It's no good as a strong adhesive, but it can certainly be used as a weak or mild adhesive in some way. Often your grandparents would have used wax for sealing things like bottles and jars, and you can use something like a sealing wax to seal the rim of your jar or the seal around your bottle to help hold full food and water in there to help preserve it over time. So another use for your sealing wax if you wanted to. Okay, so you're adventuring through a location and you've got a location you don't really want anybody to get into, so you want to seal it up. You can stick your seal over a window or a hinge on a hinge, so if the hinge is opened it will break. You can put it over a window so you can see the seal has been broken. You can put it over a door, and essentially that lets you know if somebody has opened that window, that hinge, that door in some way before you sort of explore it. Think of it like James Bond using the piece of hair he's pulled from his head and licked it and then stuck it over the door and the door frame in some way. I believe that was in James Bond. Was it Dr. No, I think it was. He did that little trick. You can also use wax and a stamp to make a document look more authentic or official. This is when you want to forge a document. Maybe you want to make a document up. Something like sealing wax often is used as a way of showing authenticity of the document, because whoever's signed it will have their own particular stamp, and of course you've got to make sure you are using the correct stamp, otherwise somebody's going to figure out you are pulling a fast one. You can use wax to create a mold for casting an item. This is a very simple way of making a cast. It usually doesn't last very long. So in other words, when you make a cast using wax, it's usually a one-use application, and then after that, there's no other use for it. And you can cast all sorts of different things by doing this. It's used often as a preliminary mold before making the actual mold that will last for a long period of time. Now, why would you use something like that? So that you can make a casting of a banana. Probably not a casting of banana, but there might be other things you need to make a duplicate of in some way. I'm going to get back to that. You can seal a small liquid leak. So if there is a leak in, say, a boat and it's very small, or in some other location and you're trying to seal it up, well, wax is actually a very good way of sealing up that location. You can jam a cloth in there and then go over the cloth with your wax, and then of course once it's hardened it will stop the water permeating through the hole that it's been created. Now, it's no good for a very large leak, but for very small leaks it certainly could be quite useful for plugging them up. If you're the sort of person who likes to take a lot of different items with them when they're exploring, you can pour hot wax or sealing wax over the tinder twigs to make them into sort of like waterproof matches, so that when you need to actually light them up, and you've been walking around in the rain all day and all your pack's soaked, and you try to light a fire, and the Dungeon Master says, well, no, you can't light a fire because your tinder twigs and your flint and steel are, they're all wood, they're all wet, so those tinder twigs aren't going to light. There's no way of that happening. And you say, well, remember that time I actually coated all of my tinder twigs with sealing wax to help waterproof them? And then he can say, or she can say, oh, that's right, you did. Okay, so that's fine. You can light the fire. You can use wax as a torture device. This is really horrible, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Essentially, pour hot wax over your prisoner to get them to talk. And moving on from there, you can use wax for your skis. So when you go skiing or snowboarding, or even if you're going surfing, there might be an opportunity, of course, during your adventuring, that you're going to go skiing down a mountainside on all sorts of things. You could even rub this onto not just your skis, but rub it onto your shield and use that as the ski that you sit on as you zip down the hill on that snow. So another way of using your sealing wax in some way. Now, you were wondering why I was talking about the mold. Here it is. You need to create a quick mold for a key. You've managed to steal a key or acquire the key. You need to make an imprint of it so you can make a duplicate so you can get into a location. And sealing wax is a really good way of doing that. So another option and way you can use your sealing wax in the game. Maybe you need to seal up a gas vent. So there might be a gas vent that's connected to some sort of trap. So before the trap triggers and before you start mucking around with it, you find the gas vent where the gas would come through. If you were lucky enough to actually find it, then you can jam it with some cloth or jam your sealing wax straight over the hole, seal it up. Once it's hard, then trigger the trap and the gas doesn't dispense throughout the room or chamber, killing everybody. Or maybe you have a party member within your group who has a lot of gas problems and you need to seal them up so they don't wind up poisoning everybody. You can stuff this wax with some cloth. You can wax it up and then stick it in your ears and plug them up. So you're basically using a wax plug to protect you from sound. Maybe there's a very loud noise. Maybe there's a siren who is going to sort of pull you into the deep and charm you in some way. You need to protect your ears and some way to protect yourself. Use that wax and that cloth. Another way to use it. You can pretty much waterproof small objects and items. So this could be the seal around a small metal container. You might need to actually waterproof some paper so it doesn't get wet, or a piece of wood. Even metal can be waterproofed with wax. And maybe you need a basket to float in a stream, so you can waterproof that basket with wax as well. Okay, the last one is usually the domain of chalk. But you can also use wax to mark the floors and the walls, and it's more likely to stay put. So once you apply your wax to the wall or floor, of course you've got to actually melt it and let it set in place. It's going to stay there. It's waterproof, unlike something like chalk, which will tend to actually wash off if it gets damp or there's water around or somebody decides to brush it off. Something like a wax seal is more likely to stay there over time if you need it to. Okay, so I'm hoping you found this video helpful, informative, and useful. I know a lot of people will be saying, isn't wax useful for some spells? There really aren't a lot of spells that use sealing wax. And I know people will say, yes, but you can use sealing wax on a scroll or your book, your spellcasting book, or maybe on a ward of some kind. Maybe that is the case, but I didn't really want to go into that in a lot of detail. Now, if you liked this video, I have quite a few videos on different types of adventuring gear and how you can use them in your game in a creative manner. So if you're interested, go and check out, I believe it's called Adventuring Gear, the playlist. If you are interested in other content that I make, I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters covering a vast array of different topics. Now, if you want to support the channel so I keep doing videos like this, I have a Patreon page where you get access to the live streams additional content and priority on the video content that I make. I also have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon where you can buy stuff online. I get a small commission. I have a merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.